Christian Order in a Liberal Age with Jon Harris. Stick around.
Exploring theology, doctrine, and all of the fascinating subjects in between, broadcasting from an undisclosed location, Dead Men Walking starts
now.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Dead Men Walking Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Moore. You can find out more about us at DMWpodcast.com or follow us on social media anywhere you see Dead Men Walking Podcast. Well, thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing with a friend. That's how we grow. We appreciate you guys. This week we had on Jon Harris. He is a podcast host of Conversations That Matter, and he's got a new book out called Against the Waves, Christian Order in a Liberal Age. And I sat down with him for probably about 35 minutes, and we talked about liberal order versus Christ's order. We talked about how that comes in alignment, how order is, hierarchy and order is from God, is directed by God, how civil governments are to obey that. And it was a fun conversation. Jon has helped me in the past with getting some guests on the podcast. We're friends on X, and I always appreciate his tweets and some of the things he has done. He had some connection to the David Platt documentary and helped me get some guys on with that. And I just wanted to have him on and explore the book a little bit, what it meant to kind of contrast God's order versus liberal order, which really is kind of a chaos, really, when you talk about liberal order. And we even got a little political, too, talked about libertarianism, the political spectrum, Christless conservatism versus regular conservatism or God-centered conservatism, I should say. But all in all, it was a pretty good episode. It was fun. He brought up a few things that really sparked some interest in me, and we discussed that. But I would say, go check him out. Click on the links below if you want to order his book or follow him on X or just check out what he's up to. He does film, he does podcasts, he does books, he does it all, man. He's just a cool brother in the Lord, and glad I got to speak with him. But with me, man, can't wait for it to get a little bit warmer. We had a little cold spell here in Michigan where it's been down to 28 degrees. We're in the middle of April, and it's just like, let's go already. Let's get to the 60s, the 70s, springtime, start doing that yard work, which I really like to do. The older I get, the more I just like spending time outside. I'm building some raised flower bed garden boxes. Shout out Jacob Supply, hooked us up with some lumber here in Temperance, Michigan. So appreciate that, brother. Jacob Armentrout, which I just had dinner with him and his wife and another couple from my church, Randy Meyer, and his wife, which was just phenomenal. Sometimes you meet these guys like Randy, and he's been on the podcast before. He was on a few years ago. We were talking about Calvinism in general, but Randy's one of those guys. He's got all of his vinyl. He used to be a DJ, and he has an extensive knowledge of music, bourbon, beers, tobacco, theology, all the stuff that you want a guy to know about. He knows a lot about it, and it was just a joy. But I just had to laugh because he's probably got 500 vinyl on his wall, and we're kind of listening to music while we're visiting with these couples, my wife and I. And he knows exactly right where every vinyl is. He's got them organized by genre and alphabetically. And I just looked at that and I go, man, I wish I could be that organized. It's just not one of my strong suits. I'm always looking for stuff and where's this at? And I rely way too much on the search bar on my phone. Everything's digital now and you can just search it and it brings it up, right? But that was a fun time. We had a good time. We ordered in, had some Mediterranean, and just had some good fellowship with some brothers and sisters in the Lord. But Jon Harris is another one of those guys that I'm sure it was the first time on the podcast for him. I'm sure he'll be on again. At the end, he said he's working on a super secret project, but when he can talk about it, he'll come on and talk about it. So until then, enjoy me and Jon talking about Christian order in a liberal age, what that looks like. Hope you enjoy. Here we go. So, Jon, welcome to the podcast. First time on. Glad to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Hey, for the listeners, give us the origin story of Jon Harris. And for me, I want to know a little bit more about you. So give us a little background, what you're all about.
Yeah, so I don't know where to start. Raised in a Christian home, and it's a Baptist home. So when I was in my teenage years, you have the struggle of when I made that profession when I was young, was that legitimate? Was it not? And I, I kind of struggled through that and came to a conviction that it was Christ's work. It wasn't my decision that saved me. And then I was more self-consciously, I suppose, reformed at that point. I ended up going to a community college in my neck of the woods where I started leading a Bible study. I never wanted to be in ministry, but I just kept finding myself in situations like that. And I found I enjoyed it and people were blessed by it. So I kept going down that path, went to seminary, and that was at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. That's where I graduated from. They had a social justice problem there. And so I tried to go through the proper channels. It didn't really work the way I wanted it to work. And I ended up finally deciding I was going to whistleblow online and wasn't intending to start a podcast, was not thinking that I would ever have a big audience. I just wanted people to know what Southeastern was doing. And it kind of went viral. And I had people from all over the Southern Baptists and other groups outside of them, the evangelicals, tell me, hey, it's happening where I am. Keep talking about social justice. That was January 2019. We know what happened in 2020. 2020, the podcast gets a big boost. 2021, I'm able to go full-time writing, podcasting, speaking, documentary filmmaking, all the stuff I do. And that's pretty much it. That brings us to where we are now. So actually, I'm starting to get back into ministry after a 6-year kind of, I don't know what I want to call it. It was a detour. We'll put it that way. And it would to help slay a giant. And so now I'm still going to have the podcast, but we're going to start doing a little more, I think, biblical stuff. And that's kind of my thing now, I guess, like biblical material. So some sermons and Bible study stuff, but also focusing on the Christian conservative tradition. I'm very much a, some people say paleo conservative, but like, an Anglo American Christian conservative. And I think I want to reconnect Christians to their past, and I want to connect non-Christians to Christianity. So that's what it's about.
Oh, that's awesome. And I'm assuming we're talking about Conversations That Matter, is the
Yep.
podcast, and I've been blessed by it. I really like what you tweet on X. Follow you there, and we'll make sure we link that up, guys. If you're watching or listening right now, just click through on the description. You can get to all the places where you can hear or see Jon. But today we want to talk about your book, Against the Waves: Christian Order in a Liberal Age. And I found the title very interesting. And I have to admit, I haven't read it yet. I'm on my way to doing that. But I want you to give us a little preview, and maybe we can talk about it a little bit, and people will get interested in it, and they can go out and purchase it and check it out. So tell me a little bit about Against the Waves.
Yeah. So Against the Waves, this is what it looks like. Christian Order in a Liberal Age is a series of essays that I've written probably starting in 2022 or so that seek to address questions people have had post 2020, especially about the liberal order that we live in. And we've lived in a liberal order our whole life. It doesn't really matter how old you are, you're part of it. Perhaps it's gotten more liberal, but the woke movement was essentially an attempt to call a bluff on liberalism and say liberalism promises all this equality, and we're supposed to reach a society that's somewhat utopian, and we haven't actually reached it. So instead of just leveling the playing field for everyone and creating a neutral society for all peoples, we need to tip the scales. And there was a backlash against this, understandably. And Christians, which is the world I am in, Christians responded in two primarily different ways, maybe more than that, but I see two broad ones. One was to attack it from the direction of a liberal order assumption. And that is that social justice was wrong because it made people think in terms of their group identity, or it privileged some people over others. And so that's a sinful thing, and that violates Christian principles such as there's neither Jew nor Greek, and there's only one in Christ. So that was one way of trying to navigate that. The way that I navigated it was never that. My way of navigating it was seeing it as a revolutionary move to upend the created order, but it was an extension of an already pre-existing move to do the same thing in more gradual way. And for Christians, and this is broadly speaking, I think conservatives as well, like true actual conservatives that are traditional, not so this doesn't apply to everyone who calls himself conservative, but I'm talking about like a
Sure.
Burkean Anglo-American conservative tradition, which is very fused to Christianity. They would say that there's an order that we must reconcile ourselves to that exists out there. And there's a moral law with that. But there's also just these templates God has laid down. For example, men and women are complementary and should marry one another. They shouldn't seek to arrange those kinds of contracts with people of the same sex. That's a very basic thing. And we should form a social order around the differences between these sects and around the differences that exist between peoples. So that's broadly speaking, that's the order that God has laid down. And then that is distilled into our unique situation based upon the traditions that we have that are unique to our society. So, for example, as an Anglo Protestant American, Christianity in a universal sense can tell me that drag queen story hour is wrong, or that it's wrong for the government to tell you to shut your church down because Jesus said to me. But my Anglo Protestant tradition can tell me in a unique way that my local county sheriff can resist these things. So I can work through these conditions that are unique to my circumstance. And so that's what I'm trying to really get people to understand in this book is that there is a created order out there. We are to reconcile ourselves to it. And that means we're counter-revolutionary. We're going to reject the liberal order, which is revolutionary, but we're also going to reject wokeness, which is even more revolutionary, perhaps you could say. And we are going to embrace our the universal things from God's created order that He expects us uh, to form our obligations, and we're also going to embrace the unique things in history. It is His story that God has put in our path that determine the proximity that we share with others and the unique traditions, some of them Christian inspired, that have grown up around us that make for good order. So that's pretty much it. So we have questions about what is a nation and what does a leader look like, and how should I interact with my phone, and is pornography and video games and screen addictions, like, how does that relate to the created order, and how do we overcome those things? And so there's a plethora of issues in there that are all unique to our modern age, but I try to give you answers starting from the assumption that God has laid down an order by which we must comply ourselves.
So this is interesting to me because we often do talk big picture. I say we, but I'm saying people within my circles where for years and years, I mean, you go back to high school with me and I was talking about the buying of Congress and lobbyists and the fourth arm of the government and all these things when, all of my other students in class were doing their senior projects on, I don't know, Van Halen and other things. And so I've been talking big picture about created order. And to me, it seems very simple that Satan's goal is to upend the created order. That's one of the best ways to fight and to trick and to gain in the flesh. But there's not a whole lot of people talking about, okay, what's the pragmatic way that we fight these modern day things? I hear you mention video games, and that just kind of piques my interest. And I go, okay, so
Sure.
just because what do we do? I have children that want to play video games. I've never been a big gamer myself. I'm not good at them, and I just don't like things doing things I can't absolutely win at. Maybe that's my competitive nature, but so video games is an interesting one. Are there kind of micro things? We always talk macro, and we understand the created order. I think most of the audience here would too. But what are some of the pragmatic micro things that you see in today's culture in
Mhm.
2025 that Christians can look at and go, okay, we need to examine this. And this is something
Sure.
that has kind of been slipped in by the liberal order, and it's whatever. It's defiance to God. It's not good for us spiritually. Maybe it's fleshly. What are some do you address any of those things in the book? It sounds like you do. What are some of
I
those
do, yeah.
examples?
Yeah, so I think it's important we understand what the liberal order is first. So the liberal
Okay.
order, I mentioned neutral society, but essentially, it starts out with the basic unit being the individual, and then the individual gets to sort of come into himself or herself through choices they make in the marketplace. And as broad of an array of choices as possible in the marketplace is the good. And the individual choosing those things and having options is the good. And so this makes for a very multicultural, diverse, um, you could say, religiously pluralistic type of society, and that they operate supposedly on a neutral frame. This only has worked in our country, and it really hasn't worked, but we have the
Right.
illusion that it works because we've had a Christian, I think, default setting for so long. And as long as the majority were Christians, these other minority classes didn't really cause a big stir, but until recently. And now, of course, there is a big stir caused by it.
Well,
And
it kind of feels like we coasted on Christless conservatism, for the last 50 or 60 years,
yeah, that's an interesting term. I don't I like it sometimes. I don't like it other times. It's interesting. Yeah, because so Christ, I think overall I agree with it. Yeah, like Christless conservatism is bad. But there are like if you mean by that though, there are people who are not born again believers who actually can be allies with us, I think, in
Sure.
not you know what I'm trying to say, like in co-belligerence and trying to restore a sense of order. And I'll give you an example. A lot of Moms for Liberty folks I mean, first of all, it's Moms for Liberty, right? So a Christian order would be like Dads for Liberty, probably, but
Right.
it's
Right.
moms are doing the work dads probably should be doing. And maybe that's suitable for certain circumstances when the dads are not doing it. But they go out, and many of them are not Christians, but what are they supporting? They're saying there's an order that we recognize, you're violating it, and you're not going to do it with our kids. So,
Yeah,
so,
the
so
only thing,
go ahead,
really
go
quick,
ahead.
the only thing I was saying there was, and I've been involved in politics for a long time, ran some stuff. I'm a locally elected county commissioner. I deal with this kind of what good should the government not do. And I found even conservatives outside of Christ, they're trying to conserve something, some tradition, something traditional. But ultimately, we've seen it work through the GOP, where if Christ is not the center of that, the Bible isn't the backbone of that, they don't really know what they're conserving or what they're fighting for. And you'll get to where we are now with the establishment GOP, let's say, for instance, where we just keep conceding because the left does have an ideology, does have a religion, uh,
So,
and they enforce it very
absolutely.
well. So I'm just saying, if the ultimate goal isn't Christ, I guess that's why I was saying Christ is conservatism. It's kind of a cliche term; it's popular right now. But I was just saying, outside of that order, we need to understand what that order is, what it is we're standing on, what the civil spheres is for, all those kind of things.
Yeah, and I wasn't meaning to chide you at all.
Oh,
I
you're fine.
assumed that you and I are lining up with what we mean by Christless conservatism.
Yeah.
I think so yeah, I want to get to your question about specifics here, but I think the thing I want to emphasize for Christians is that there is an order out there that God has set up. It's not arbitrary. And I
Mm,
do see some Christians behave in arbitrary ways. Like, we have a book, we have standards. And so that's who we are. We want to impose this. And okay, sure. But be, why does this actually though make sense? Like, it's not, didn't just say that men should be the leaders in the home, in the church, and even in civil society because he felt like it one day. Like, he actually designed men for this task, and even pagans can recognize that men are designed for this task. It is possible because there is an order that they live in that they have to suppress that, right, to kind of get around it.
sure.
So I'm trying to tell non-Christians basically come to Christ. He is the one who created this. All things were created for him and through him and for him rather. And and I want to let Christians know, like, there's this rich tradition of recognizing order and even seeing how tradition can convey order
Yeah.
that we need to we're not reinventing the wheel. We can actually go back and tap into some of these things. So I do quote guys like Edmund Burke and Richard Weaver and Mel Bradford and some of these older voices. You probably, not you, but people listening, you probably never heard of these guys, but we have this rich tradition to tap into, and like we shouldn't neglect it. People have thought through a lot of these things. So some of the things that I talk about, and like you mentioned the phone thing, so screen addiction. I talk
Yeah.
about in a section on appreciating nature. It's chapter 2 that we spend way too much time on our phones, myself included, and this is actually a problem. There's a variety of, I go through some stats. There's a variety of problems just related to what it does to your brain and your reward system in your brain to spend that much time on screens, on social media. Those marketers know what they're doing, but beyond that, I think it's what you're not doing during that time that probably is the bigger issue here. You're not actually spending time in God's world, and God did make his world for us to appreciate. So being in nature is putting yourself in a circumstance where you have a more likelihood of listening to God, what God's saying. And I don't mean that in an esoteric, charismatic sense necessarily. I mean that more in there are mountaintop experiences we see in Scripture. Even Jesus would go off and pray all night sometimes, and he was the king of the universe. I mean, if anyone needed to pray, it probably wasn't him. He had all the power, but he made this a priority. You see, lots of examples in Proverbs, obviously, of observing creation. You see Job observing creation. You see Elijah and the still small voice. I mean, these things happen in a natural setting. There's amazing things that can happen in those settings. And if we're just inside, if we're just on screens, we neglect that. So I'm trying to get back to God has an order out there. We should go and we should be part of that. And in so doing, we actually are communicating with God in the sense of not in a new age sense, but by admiring his creation, that there's beauty, there's sublimity. Some of the older guys, Edmund Burke wrote a lot about this,
Sure.
recognize this and the effects that it has on us. We need this to nurture our souls. We need this to be able to understand and categorize our thoughts and know what we're fighting for. We need it to fear God and to appreciate also the beauty and the rest that he gives us. If we're not resting, if we're not fearing God, if we're constantly distracted, we will not be able to achieve the true potential that God has for us. So that's like one practical thing is, how do we do that? And so I lay out some strategies for that. Um, Also, things like on a civil level, what do we do when the national or the general government wants to come in and tell us what to do, and it's not in accord with Christ's commands, or it denies our civil liberties that we use to protect ourselves for self-preservation? And so I go through some practical strategies for that, like the anti-commandeering doctrine, and I talk a little bit about nullification, which is something that some more liberal states have done this, but it's hard for conservatives to ever muster the force to be able to nullify things. I talk a little bit about even secession as, and it's part of a broader kind of discussion on redrawing lines. So right now in Oregon and Washington, there's a dispute over whether or not they should be part of the Greater Idaho Project, because it makes sense. You have conservatives consuming or living on 80% of the land. Only 20% is the left, but the left controls the whole region. Is that really fair? And so, so this is part of God's ordering too. Like God has ordained, and this isn't a Bible verse. This is just looking at the situation we have before us and how he has written the story of the people who live in Eastern Oregon. They live in a region surrounded by conservatives who are mostly focused on and respectful of the Bible, and they have to be controlled by people who are against them. Is there a way to remedy this situation? Right. So I look for mechanisms to do that. And so that's another focus, very localist, very decentralized, very federal. There's stuff about leadership in there as well. I have some practical examples and mechanisms for how to identify virtuous leaders and then accelerate them to get to the point of actually taking power and
Yep.
wielding it for the love of neighbor. So I could go on, but those are just some of the few practical things that are in there.
Yeah, and those are all great. I think we need to be talking about that more. I seem to be talking about that a lot just because of where I find myself in life and, and what I do in the political realm. But one of the most important things that I think has happened, and I'm glad it has because I've been talking about it for quite some time, was the theory of neutralness, of neutrality, that it doesn't really exist. You are either for God or against God. And we had this lie given to us, even growing up, just kind of like how you mentioned before, me growing up in the 80s and 90s. And saying, well, there's this kind of neutral space that you can have. You can just kind of respect each other and let everyone do their own thing. And we kind of had it under this guise of liberty and freedom. But there's a neutral space. The government's kind of neutral. The civil sphere is kind of neutral. And then you realize, well, not really. You're either for or against. And you brought up that word. And I'm just wondering if we're tracking on the same thing there, to where I see in a lot of people wake up after COVID and realize, oh, our civil governments aren't neutral. They definitely have a moral code, so to speak, or an ideology that they're going to enforce. And it is either for Christ or against Christ. And I saw a lot of churches wake up to that. I saw a lot of churches concede to that and follow that. But it was kind of a nice refining of the Christian Western American church of going, okay, where do you stand on that? Um, what's your view on neutrality when you're talking about governments and systems and ideologies?
Well, neutrality is part of the liberal order. That's baked into
Okay,
the cake when we're young. We think that things like, you can do whatever you want as long as it doesn't hurt anyone. We think you can be anything you want to be. So now that's even gone into this the question of you can be any gender you want to be.
sure.
Um, we we think that as long as that no one should be able to tell you what to do with your body. These are all very liberal order kind of assumptions. And in a virtuous land
Mhm.
where people are going to self limit because they want self government, you can actually have a neutrality in a sense. You don't, in other words, you don't have to. I don't think true neutrality is ever possible, but you can have a greater uh, kind of levity in your laws where you're not going to be coming down on vices that people aren't practicing. For example, there weren't a lot of libertarians like to point out that you didn't have laws against drugs uh, in the founding era, right? People could, if they wanted to chew on a plant that gave them hallucinogenic, experience, I suppose they could do that, right? There's and maybe someone might be able to find like a local town ordinance or something that limits some of this. But yeah, I mean, like things like alcohol, it wasn't it could be abused, but like these things were mitigated. It wasn't as abused as maybe it came to be. And so now when people aren't limiting their decisions, the government has to come in and limit them for good order to continue in a society, right?
Yeah.
So I think what liberalism does, and this is my best kind of steel manning of a Christian liberal, kind of classic liberal viewpoint, is it freeze frames an element of like a Christian civilization at one point that was included a high level of public trust and a high level of public virtue. And then it takes that into a situation where we don't have those things.
Yeah.
So, um, so I think that yes, you can have laws that allow for freedom of conscience, and or at least you can have like districts in which there aren't state imposed religions and these kinds of things, of course, and you can be fine. But it really depends on the quality of your people. What's happened is these arrangements that I'm describing have become ideologies, rigid, universal ideologies that are meant to express the final state of political arrangement. So we should always be striving for democracy, for choice, for free markets, and that some people say we should tax you to pay for other people's choices. Other people say, well, that's a violation of my choice. But either way, it's about choice. It's about people being able to freely choose what they want to do, whether that's strip clubs or church, right?
Yeah.
And and so this is now imposed imperialistically on everyone. We go to the Middle East and we think, well, we're going to add some democracy here, and we're going to now have freedom. And it doesn't work that way. That society is certainly not suited for that. And there's going to be different arrangements in different places. So this isn't a universal ideological thing that we can just rigidly apply everywhere. But that's what liberals think about it. They think that they've reached the final conclusion for what the scientific principle behind what all society should look like. And of course, this is godless. Okay,
Yeah.
when you turn it into this ideology, and it's not just an arrangement that's derived from local conditions and tradition, you do kick God to the curb, because what you're saying is that God's order does not actually have to be upheld. That's not the highest good. The highest good is upholding man's autonomous choice, essentially.
Sure.
That becomes the highest good. And I'm trying to, if you looked at a political scale, right, you've seen a lot of these where it's like a freedom versus totalitarianism or something.
Sure.
And I would say, no, the political scale is there's God's order on one side and upholding that order, what he requires of us in our social arrangements. And on the other side, there's revolution against that order. And that can take many different forms. So
Mm.
that's the essence of real conservatism, is the upholding of good order.
Conserving God's order. Yeah.
That's right.
It's pretty crazy to me because it's pretty straightforward. In the last 1,500 years, if you look at the most successful, and when I say successful, I would say virtuous, economically successful countries, they were the ones that were most marred in Christendom. Just like you said, you can't go to Iraq or Iran or Afghanistan and just drop in the right to vote and go democracy. There you go. Ready to go. And even in this our own country, and tell me what you think about this. 100 years ago, like you were saying about someone chewing on a root or a psychedelic, virtues like temperance were very highly esteemed, and you were publicly shamed if you did not
Right.
work or you abandoned your family, or you were the town drunk. And then 100 years ago, and then even 50 years ago, you saw that in entertainment. You go back to shows even in the 50s up into the sexual revolution in the mid 60s. It was very those with those type of characteristics were kind of publicly shamed. And you have this culture. I would argue the closer you are to Christ's order, to God's order, you have these characteristics that are valued in a culture, and then you have ones that are shamed and shunned. And now in 2025, we have flipped that right on its head to where it is do your truth, hustle when you want, and who cares who you're providing for, and you get yours. And so now we've glorified these characteristics and these personality traits and all these things that are antichrist, anti-biblical, not God's order, in fact, chaos and very bad for us. How do we as a society get back to the culture that would actually shame someone for, like I said, not taking, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
really, yes, we can have lip service and say we're Christ honoring, but if the culture isn't there, and
Mhm.
that's another 2-hour podcast. What is actual
Yeah.
culture? Because
I
because I believe most of our race and ethnic kind of debates are really cultural ones, is what we're
Mhm.
talking about. And Thomas Sowell does great work on this, culture versus race. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Is there? I'm basically asking John, solve all of the world's problems.
Oh, yeah, I can Jesus. There's my one
There you
word
go.
answer for
Well, I
solving
agree.
this. Uh, okay, so I'm trying to think what vein to go down, race, culture, or just what so
Wherever you want to go,
if you
brother.
could distill it. Yeah, um, okay, so I
I'll
am
give you a lot there.
concerned. I think this is the most prudent thing, an important thing for me to say. Probably, I am concerned that we're very deracinated, meaning we're separated from our past and
Hmm,
the things that
okay.
confer identity. That means that we don't have a people, we don't have a place, we don't have a past. We're kind of just left hanging there, and we've been given entertainment to fill that void, and it doesn't fill the void. So now, when we relate to each other, we do so with memes and with mostly Hollywood derived movies.
Hmm,
That's our lingua franca. That's our
interesting.
that yeah. It's Star Wars quotes. It's Marvel universe. A lot of people know more about that than they do their own history. This is a problem
Yeah.
for us, and part of it is we've pushed virtue, like masculine virtue, is pushed to the fantasy world where you can kind of get away with expressing it. We can't really have it in the real world because it's too scary.
Oh.
Same thing with hierarchies, like even things like fairy tales. Every fairy tale in the modern retelling has two morals: that arranged marriages are bad, or that people should decide and not the king. But at the same time, what happens? Why are we fascinated with princesses and kings? Because we actually like the hierarchy of it. We like the pomp and circumstance. There's something that comforts us about someone who is setting an example above us. And so anyway, all that to say, we have kind of cut ourselves off from a lot. And I'm not by the way making an argument to return to kings at all, but I'm just saying hierarchies are inevitable. So
Yeah.
um so here's the question, I suppose. We
Very, very quickly, do you think
Mhm.
in you're stating hierarchy part of God's created order as well?
Absolutely,
Okay. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, we're very conservatives are pro hierarchy and pro order.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that every hierarchy is a good hierarchy, and it doesn't mean hierarchies can't be abused.
Yeah. But
What
the
it does
system of,
mean
yeah.
what it does mean is you're going to have a hierarchy no matter what, and you want it to conform to God's order. So, for example, men should be social leaders. They should be the ones that are heading us, leading us in wartime conflict. It's a shameful thing if it's a woman doing that. Now,
Agreed.
I mean, this is just like sort of biblical 101 stuff, right? I'm talking about like political leaders. And so obviously there's circumstances where you have a Deborah moment and it's like, no guy's going to do it. I guess I'll do it. But the norm should be guys are the ones doing these kinds of things. So that's part of the public order that we intend to uphold as believers. It doesn't mean that that can't be abused. It doesn't mean that there aren't tyrants that will try to use that even in the home to abuse their wives. That's where other men should come in and stop them. But if you eliminate that altogether and say, we're not going to have, no fault divorce, we're not going to have any of the things that used to protect women, then you end up creating a situation where there's still abuse, maybe more, I think more. And there's still now a hierarchy. It's just now more so the individual and the state. That's the big discrepancy. That's the big
Ah,
barrier. So the state becomes more powerful in this arrangement. Local arrangements aren't keeping guys in check as much. It's now a legal system coming down from on high, and now our courts are clogged, and now everything's behind schedule, and so it's women are continuing in abusive circumstances or circumstances where they can't feed themselves, waiting for courts to decide their plight. So you see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
it's because we're denying God's order, it pops out somewhere else, and usually in a bad way. All
Oh,
right, so go ahead.
yeah. No, I was just going to say, you kind of opened my eyes to that visual. I just want to stay on that for a moment. So the
Okay.
hierarchy and the order does not go away.
Hmm.
Instead of having this nice stepping stone of child, wife, father, local government, church, civil sphere, kind of this hierarchy ladder,
Yeah.
you have this autonomous government, and then all these little individuals, and there's still a hierarchy there. It's just the chasm has become wider and the tyranny has become greater.
Yeah, there's
That
more opportunity for
Yeah,
tyranny
it's
now.
interesting.
And
No, I
well,
like that.
let me give you another one to really make people upset. We ended a slavery system that existed here in the 19th century, but what the effect of that was, and the conditions in which we did it, we ended up seeing about 1 million slaves starve and die in a horribly war-torn region. And the connection, the more relational and familial connection that once existed, um, and obviously there's exceptions, there's abusive situations, obviously, but that, sort of from a bird's eye view, that connection that once existed between a slave class and their masters was severed. And it didn't go away, though. The new connection is between this slave class and their descendants, and now a government that treats them like numbers. That there
Yeah.
is no familial anything. It's just, and now you're stuck in generational welfare, and have the conditions gotten any better in these urban areas where many of these people who have descended from that class live? No, they're far worse in some ways. And the problem wasn't solved, is my point. The problem that was supposedly addressed wasn't completely solved in that, and new problems were created. So the liberal order is something that it sounds good. The cures always sound good, but some cures can also be worse than diseases, and you have to have a lot of prudence, and you have to understand the order that actually exists in the human condition, that people are sinful, to be able to wisely navigate disrupting arrangements like that. So conservatives are very cautious about disrupting arrangements. It doesn't mean we can't do it. It just means it's gradual usually, and it's going to be something where we want to experiment. We want to run the case in different regions to make sure, okay, let's see how it worked there. Is it going to work here? Instead of just kind of ideologically wholesale imposing a vision that we don't know what the effect of it is going to be. Um,
Yeah.
so there's many more examples I could give, labor laws and school systems and all these things. But the bottom line is hierarchy is inevitable, and we should conform ourselves to God's hierarchy. He's given us some principles by which to construct a good arrangement for ourselves and our posterity. And I'm trying to remember what your question now was on. I kind of gotten so far away from the question that you had.
No, you're
Um,
good. But I always like to ask this question. Obviously, we're talking about Against the Waves, Christian Order in a Liberal Age. Anyone who writes a book, I always like to ask this question. Was there one thing that you kind of learned, or you had a new appreciation for, or you went, when I really dove into this subject, I found out something I didn't know about it or were surprised by in a subject when writing a book? Because there's a lot of research that goes in
yeah.
to writing a book. And obviously, this book is full of statistics and a lot of research and history. Was there one thing that kind of stuck out to you and you went, that's interesting, that you maybe didn't know before?
Man, I was really always hoping for years. Been hoping I could do a deep dive on a guy named Harry Jaffa, because he gave us this idea called the Proposition Nation, and I don't want to blame him completely. It's not just him, but I think he popularized it in politically conservative circles. And Jaffa, essentially started, and he's the brain the brains behind the Claremont Institute, which is a very popular conservative think tank. I know many friends who are part of that, and I respect them. And I like some of the good work Claremont's doing. Actually, I actually just submitted an essay to them, so I'm hoping they take it. Maybe they won't after they hear me. But Jaffa was not a good guy in my opinion. At
Okay.
least I don't mean morally necessarily. I don't know about that, but he's an arrogant guy. But he imposed a vision onto American conservatism, which is really more of a leftist vision. And it sees America as an idea. It's reducible to an idea that this universal understanding of equality. And that's what, and the fruit of that has been anyone can come into our country that as long as they share the ideal, this common creed, or we can go plant America anywhere else, as long as they have the common creed. So he took it away from a shared experience, tradition, ancestry, all the things that really do root people,
Mm,
even including Christianity. And he brought it into this very abstract, very narrow set of principles. And it's done nothing but give us bad fruit and destabilized us. And so was able to do a deep dive on him and just
interesting.
explain for people, why is it that you hear even Republican operatives today will be like, well, Democrats are the real racists or whatever. That's from Jaffa, really. That's a Jaffa thing to say. And it's adopting the leftist frame. It's trying to say that like anyone, and of course, that's a broad spectrum. Anyone is called racist, right? I mean, I've been called that just because,
Sure.
it's like, it's funny to me a little. It's humorous almost because it's like, you obviously don't see my life and the people I'm friends with and all that stuff, right? But that doesn't matter. That's not what it's about. It's
Well,
about,
yeah, it's absurdity becoming comedy. Yeah.
yeah, it's becoming a comedy, but it's because I think there's a specific definition to what makes a nation, and it's
Yeah.
not just out there waiting to be defined. It's not just equality, and it's not just this sort of nebulous idea of what freedom is. It actually is rooted in a real, tangible tradition, and there are these other components that are rooted, and that's enough for people to say you're a racist. No, I just believe in God's natural order that he's made. And you see this in the pages of scripture. There's another chapter where I really get into a lot of scripture on what is a nation. And it's an extension of of a family. That's what a nation is. And so anyway, long
Wow.
story short, I really enjoyed studying Jaffa and just kind of taking him apart and showing why he was a revolutionary.
Yeah, so I'm not too familiar with him, and the way you frame that as we finish up here, yeah, that's crazy because growing up and kind of going through the Bush senior, Clinton, Bush years, that was a huge kind of thing. Like America is this idea, this experiment, this idea, and we can just
Yes.
export this idea, American exceptionalism, and this
Diversity
idea.
is our strength. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you sit back and you think about it and you go, well, no country was ever founded on an idea. There were ideas included, but they're founded on shared experiences, troubles, issues, right? Real world ancestries, tribes, like we need this, we can't have that. Like the country is founded on what you said. So it's even seeped into my brain growing up, and you kind of were given this. I didn't know it was really attributed to this one gentleman, and that is a big difference between a country being founded on kind of this idea versus, like you said, ancestry, shared experiences, problem solving, all these things,
Yeah. It's
actual real world
cuisine.
things.
It's pastimes. It's yeah, there's so many things that go into this that people don't even recognize. Like, do you have America if you don't have Thanksgiving dinner and no one's playing baseball? I mean, these are some things you have to think about. They're not speaking English. They're not like, it's a
Right.
number of things that go into what makes an American, which I think America is more of an empire, but also what makes your particular region distinct.
Yeah.
Where do you live, out of curiosity?
I'm in Michigan, 3 miles north of Toledo, Ohio, right on the border.
Okay, so my mom's side comes from Ohio. We're a
Mhm.
professor at OSU. We have songs that are sung about Michigan, which I love you as a Christian brother. I won't sing them to you. So, um,
Oh,
like
we have
those
songs
are.
about OSU fans too. Don't
Oh,
worry.
I know you do. I know you do. But those are some regional distinctions that actually do matter, and that goes
Yeah.
back to a border dispute between Ohio and Michigan. And
Look at
there's a lot of
you.
cooperation we can have between each other, but there are differences, and those differences actually mean something, and they do confer identity. And thankfully, we're not shooting at each other. We're actually just fighting on the football field and having a good time.
Yeah. Which is a way to do it. That's kind of a way to take that that aggression and kind of tame it down. So people aren't dying. We're just trying to destroy that tight end or quarterback. Awesome. So yeah, let's finish it up here. So Against the Waves, Christian Order in a Liberal Age. Is it out now? Is the book out now?
It is out now. You can go to Jon Harris. Sorry, actually, you could do it at johnharrismedia.com, but you can also go to againstthewavesbook.com.
Okay.
And it is on Kindle as well. It is also on Audible. So
Awesome.
Amazon, Kindle, Audible, or if you want to pay $5 extra and get a signed copy from me, I would appreciate it.
Oh, that's awesome. And we're going to link that up all below, guys. So if you're listening to this, you're watching this, whatever, in the description, you're going to have all the links where you can find John's book. Obviously, follow him on X. We'll link that up too. He's got some good stuff on there. And you've always been very accommodating with me with requests. And I know you hooked us up with some guests here on the podcast. I appreciate that. I really appreciate what you're doing. As we head out here, can you give us a teaser? What do you got coming in the future? We know the book's out. We know you're busy on all kinds of stuff. You got anything you're percolating or working on that you can give us a sneak peek on?
I do. It's kind of top secret. So I have to, I do have something
Okay.
important that we're working on. I'm trying to think beyond that. There's a few books that I have sort of, they wouldn't be out till probably like next year, but there's some books.
Okay.
Oh, I know what I can mention. So I am starting something on, this is on my Patreon though. So if you go to patreon.com/Jon Harris podcast, I think that's what it is. Jon Harris podcast. I'm going to be doing something on a monthly basis with my patrons exclusively. We're going to be going through the Anglo-American conservative canon of thinkers. So
Ooh, I like that.
I'm, I don't know if it'll be this month or next month that I'll start. I'm going to hope that I could do it this month, but we're going to be looking at Edmund Burke's book, Reflections on the Revolution in France.
Yeah.
That's where we're going to start. And we're going to just work our way through the Anti-Federalist Papers. That's right. I said Anti-Federalist, not Federalist. We're going to go to John C. Calhoun's Disquisition of Government. There's several good 20th century guys we're going to talk about, but we're just going to kind of keep connecting Christians with a past that they have largely forgotten and they don't see themselves as part of, but they very much are part of. And there's great Christian men who have thought through some of the problems that we're encountering, and it would just be to our peril to ignore them. So we're going to reintroduce people.
I love it. Geez, I should just pay for the Patreon and send my 3 homeschool kids over there and they get a civics, government, and philosophy credit. I love it. Jon, thanks so much for joining us, man. I appreciate you sitting down with us, telling us about the book. And anytime you want to come back on, maybe when that top secret project releases, come back on and share it with us. Okay.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks so much. Hey, guys, thanks for listening to another episode of Dead Men Walking Podcast. As always, you can find out more about us at dmwpodcast.com. Support the show. Pick up one of our mugs here, Wine 'em, Dine 'em, Romans 9 'em, or you can get one of the new t-shirts that are so popular, Job 13:5. How about you shut up and let that be your wisdom? Sometimes you just have to quote scripture to the pagans, even if they don't like it. Guys, remember the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. God bless. Be sure to check us out at dmwpodcast.com, where you can purchase the best and snarkiest merch on the internet, support the show, and leave us a review or message. Dead Men Walking can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Dead Men Walking Podcast, and on Twitter X at Real DMW Podcast. The Dead Men Walking Podcast is part of the Fight Laugh Feast Network. For exclusive show content, be sure to download the PubTV app and become a member. If you're a business that needs to reach hundreds of thousands of potential customers in your demographic, podcast advertising might be for you. Send all inquiries to deadmenwalkingpodcast@gmail.com.
None your biscuits.